Butler, and he's a World War II Army veteran, and he's going to tell us about life in the Army and some of his experiences. So, Bill.
Hey, my name is really Lawrence William Butler.
I know.
Call me Bill. Well, I was born a long time ago, 1918, so it makes me almost 97 years old. And my father was a traveling salesman, so I went to 8 schools in 12 years. It's not a record, but that's quite a bit. We lived in Denver and Billings, Montana, and Minneapolis, and back to Michigan. Michigan's close to my heart, but now I'm a Bremenite. After I got through high school, I started learning to fly. And they brought the air cadets into town, and they put you in the machine, you know, and twist you upside down and around. And I knew which way was up when they got done. But they refused to take me because I had too much overbite. Now, I don't know what overbite's got to do when you want to go German. Well, I figured after this, I would wait for the draft. And so I signed up in October of 1940. That was some of the first draft years. And they called me right away in 41. And so they took me to Kalamazoo, and I swore in that I had served the government and so on. And then they took us over to Battle Creek in Fort Custer. And of course, the time we got there, they hadn't gotten our clothes or anything like that out. So they just set us up in beds and fed us some, I thought it was slop. It wasn't mother's cooking. And, so the first bed that I had got into was only half a bed. Somebody had short-sheeted me. I'm not right in the Army right from the beginning. Well, the next day they started interviewing us and wanting to know a little of our past and so on, and that I was in farm equipment. I had driven farm equipment, and I was in the automotive business and so on. And so then they got to want to know my past history, and they said, what are you, Protestant, Catholic? I said, I'm nothing. My aunt used to teach me a week of Bible study every summer for about 3 or 4 summers. And my father had said at home, I don't want to hear anything about religion, so that was the end of my religion. And so he said, well, we have a lot of Jewish and Catholics here today. I'm going to make you a Protestant. Well, the mess from then on was terrible. They stripped you down to nothing and you weighed you in and so on. And then they wanted me to step on something, and I said, oh, I know the size shoe I wear. I wear a 7. The guy said, 8D. Only 7. No, it's 8D. That's what I got, 8D. I wanted to go with my buddy that I worked with, and they put him off to one way and me off to another. And I said, no, I'm going with him. No, you're not. See, I'm back to the Army again. They told me what to do. Well, he went to the islands and was in the death march and so on, so I was led away from that by the Lord. My first ride was to Fort Knox, Kentucky, and that was the tent city there. And we had about 6 men to every tent. And this was Lend-Lease time, and they didn't have rifles for us, so I never learned anything about rifles. All we did is march, get our shoes dirty, have to clean them, march some more. Well, instead of the 12 weeks, they only gave us 8 weeks of training, turned us to a tank outfit. we had the old World War I barracks to live in, so they were not the greatest things. They give us some small classes on first aid and things like that, but they would show us a gun and then they'd take it apart and show it to us. Now that's the way you're supposed to do it when we get our guns. I was assigned to a tank and I was going to be a driver at some time or another. And so I had to watch them and how they were shifting and so on. And then I got to be a driver, and we didn't have radios at that time, only code radios. And so the driver would get his instructions from the tank commander in back. And when he wanted you to go, he kicked you in the back, so he took off. If you wanted to go right, he stepped on my right shoulder or my left shoulder. And he wanted me to stop, well, he would step on my head. I wanted to be a good guy to him because he could do an awful job. Well, they took our tanks away from us and sent it to the Philippines with another unit from Kentucky, and they gave us some new tanks. And took us right from there down to Louisiana, so we had about 2 or 3 months of Louisiana and Texas. And we found out Louisiana is not all dry land, there's some swamps, and you could take the tank along here and all of a sudden you're in the swamp and start floating away and they have to haul you out. Then we went on up to North and South Carolina for about a month or so. And then they brought us back to Fort Knox, and that was about the time that Pearl Harbor. I think we had 2 or 3 days before Pearl Harbor. So not only being a draftee, but I had extended service from then on. One of my first jobs when I went into the Army at Fort Knox was cleaning toilets. You know, 6 on this side, 6 on this side, with a bunch of showers. Not the greatest job in the world. And then we also, we had tables in our mess halls set up, and we had table waiters. And you had to set the table up for them, and when they come charging in and they empty one of the dishes, they just hold it up high, and you're supposed to go get it back there in a hurry. It was quite a duty. We had a lot of other deals where we would paint the stones white, you know. And if they weren't white enough, we painted them white again. And then we did guard duty. There's several different kinds of guard duty. There's a main post where you have all stick and polish. And then there's prison guard, where they give you 2 or 3 prisoners and you go out and work on different details. And you're responsible for them. So if you don't come back with your prisoners, you take his place. And I had one that we had 4 of them, and we were painting an officer's house. And this one guy was always straying away. He always had to go to the bathroom. And I had to go chase him and keep those guys working. Well, I refused to take him in the afternoon because he was such a troublesome guy, and he was a federal prisoner, so I didn't want to do his federal time. And so I refused him, and they said, no, you got to take him. And about that time, the fight broke out between him and a couple of the other guys. And so the only way we could separate him and hit him in the head with a pistol. And then I refused him. They said, well, I guess you better go on with it. Then when we started for our maneuvers, they gave us a new M3 tank. And due to the fact they didn't have any 75 guns, and they just give us a tank with no guns in it. And so we'd take fence posts and stick in there so we looked like a tank at least. They made a few mistakes in them. They routed the exhaust under the gasoline tank. And it boiled gasoline, and so we had a few fires. In fact, I had 13 fires in one day. But they'd always come up and put them out with the extinguishers. Then we found some other things, that 30-ton tanks don't go over a lot of bridges in Louisiana and those places. They're 4-ton and 6-ton bridges, and we didn't realize that until we drove across them and we heard the cracky timbers and so on. Some of us got across, some of us didn't. We did do one steel bridge the same way. When we were on maneuvers, we had some fresh lieutenants right out of West Point and so on. And as we would drive down the road and then we'd park and let traffic go by, they had their wives go, and so they could go up there ahead, and then they wave to the lieutenant as he goes by. Well, one time, this one girl didn't get her car quite off far enough, and the tank in front of me run over her front fender. And so he opened up the thing, and we said, "She okay?" He says, "Yes, she speeds our pants." I didn't know that Lieutenant Waters had married into a famous family at that time. And I got a magazine from my friend John, and it told me all about this Lieutenant Waters was Patton's son-in-law. That was Patton's daughter that we run over. But it took me 70 years to find out that she was. I got married on February 14th of '42, and I was still at Fort Knox, and my wife was in Flint, Michigan, so I used to take weekends up there with her for about 6 weeks, and then they sent us to Fort Dix. Now the food in Fort Knox was really good, and food in Fort Dix was really poor. In fact, some of our fellows turned yellow from not having enough vegetables and so on. And this one afternoon, this kid come in, and he was happy as the devil. And I said, "What are you so happy about being in this army?" "Oh, I just went to church." And he says, "Oh, it's wonderful." I said, "What do you do in church?" "I've never been in church." Well, he says, "When we get through with the service, they take you home and they feed you." And now you see, this is a time when they had little red stamps to get meat. So I went to church with him, and he said, "I'll tell you what to do. Sit down, stand up, whatever we got to do." For another 6 weeks, I had good meals. Really. I got onto the cruise ship. Now, this is a cruise ship. It's called Thomas Berry. And what did I do that? Oh, here we are. They decided to put 5,000 fellows down in the base, what's the bottom of a ship anyway? A hole, okay, down the hole. And they put the other 5,000 up on top. And so we would just change places every 12 hours. You'd go downstairs and get a meal, and the others would get a meal and go upstairs. Our first meal was codfish. And I guess it was spoiled because everybody got sick, and those who weren't sick were seasick. And we had this board and our plates was on, and if the ship tips like this, well, everything went this way. And then it comes back this way, you better grab yours, because somebody was vomiting down the line. Well, we got better meals after that. We got some bad chicken for the next 12 hours. And there was a lot of sick people on that board. And all we had was number 10 cans to go potty in or vomit in. And it was quite a mess. When we shipped out, we went in a big long convoy, and they shipped us out, and we left New York and went off of Greenland and Iceland and then down to North Ireland. And this convoy was a long one. We had sub chasers, and they would do dropping depth charges and so on, and bang and shake the whole ship. When we got to North Ireland, we went into a area where we had tin huts, long huts, and we'd be about 20 guys in it. And our first chore in the morning was to run up to the top of a little mountain and back down before we got food. That was not too bad a service there, and good food and so on. And then we went across, and we thought we were making an invasion. We were in the landing craft, and we come to this land, and there's no shooting or anything. And come to find out it's Liverpool, England. So then we went down to Liverpool, to Chester, and spent a few weeks. And then we took our tanks and went to Wales and Cardiff and loaded up for the invasion into North Africa. The reason they wanted us to go into North Africa is to keep the Mediterranean open to the Suez and all that, so they could get their supplies through. Patton went in on Casablanca and so on, and he stopped there while our units went in through the Straits of Gibraltar. When we went through Gibraltar, one of the sailors said, the first thing we're going to see is torpedo planes. And he was right. Within a few hours, torpedo planes took out a lot of the ships. One ship in front of us was ammunition, and one torpedo, and it's all gone. We made our landing just through the straits there. There was Arzu was the place we were, and we worked our way. Well, it doesn't show too well here, but we worked our way clear up into Tunis, and things went pretty well until we got to squeezing the Germans. They were supplying Montgomery down in the south and keeping him down there, and he was keeping us in Africa there. And we got to squeezing him, and so he had a big buildup to drive us back. And we went and did some scouting, and we found that he didn't want us to get anywhere near where we wanted to go. So that was a dead giveaway. There's something big going. I have trouble making pages turn nowadays. They sent us back 3 tank companies. These are medium tanks. And G Company was down by this pass, which was Fayette Pass. And they were the first ones there, and H Company and our own I Company, we were back on the flanks. And they come pouring out of that pass, and they just run right over G Company. And we saw 17 fires all going there, and then they sent us in only by a platoon of 5 tanks or so on. And it wasn't long, and we were all done for. In our particular case, our tank commander got hit in the arm, and he was bleeding all over the place, so he bailed out and went back to the medics to get taken care of. And then we had been hit a lot of times, and I was hit in the track. And then I told the gunner that was in charge that we couldn't move anymore, and he said, well, bail out, we don't have any more ammunition, so we all bailed out. He was captured, my assistant gunner was killed, and I made it back to where headquarters was. And they dug out before we got there, so I climbed in that hole and I got to talking to the Lord. And I said, get me out of this place. I don't know what else to do. And I says, I'll go to church. I'll do anything for you. And it's pretty quiet there when you talk to yourself, and they're talking to the Lord too. And so he got me out of that, but I thought maybe he'd get me home or something. But that was 3 years. Well, we had one colonel that had a tank. All the rest were wiped out. I was one of 16 in our company that came back alive. So we got enough cooks and bakers and so on and filled off 5 tanks. We went out the next day to try and stop it. And we lost all of them excepting the 2. And I hauled the colonel's tank back. And then the British came through there, and their big artillery pieces and so on were able to stop them. And so we reorganized. And then when we reorganized, we had General Patton come. And the only thing that we learned under him was that it would cost you $5 if you didn't have a necktie on, or $25 if you didn't have a helmet on. And we went into a couple different skirmishes, and then he was called back for the big invasion. We got General Harmon, and he took us guys off because we reorganized, and he said, now this is what I want you to do. You kill 609, because we spent millions of dollars of ammunition, and a lot of people had died on there in the 34th Division. And so he said, now this is what you're going to do. You're going to take that hill, and then from then on it's going to be a milk run. Well, what milk run was. We found this hill to be terraced. Down here you had the regular crops, and then the next one was grape arbors, and the next one is olive trees. And of course, every time you go up one of those, you're putting the bottom of your tank up to get shot, and there's only 5/8 inch armor there. But we made it clear to the top, and we only lost 2 tanks. We had a little Jewish guy that was in one of the tanks, and he pulled this gunner out that had been wounded, and we had to patch him up. They give you instructions about a compound fracture. You take a bayonet and tie it together and use your belts to do it. Well, we couldn't find any bayonets because we'd never seen a bayonet anyway. So I got a couple of little old crooked branches, and we strapped it on, and we put him on the back of a tank and set him down, and we stayed and covered it until they were clear. But I was the last one out, and they caught me in the back end and took the top cylinder off, so we were sputtering, and it ended up a piece of shrapnel was in the gas tank guard. It didn't get to the gas tank, and so we got it down, and overnight they give me another motor so that it would be ready to go the next day. They even welded up the spot so the hole wasn't even there. Let's see here. Then from then on it was fairly easy coming on up here to Tunis and Missouri and into Tunis. And we would normally get 4 or 5 prisoners at a time, but when it was ending up, it got so many that you couldn't shake them down or anything, and 20, 25, 50, and 100, and there was 60,000 prisoners came in within that week there. We ended up on Mother's Day, and then they sent a few of us to chase all these prisoners and get them in barbed wire entanglements. And we thought we were going home because we would take the prisoners home, but they changed their ways of doing things. They had MPs come from the states and pick them up and take them back and send the bus. We were not very happy with that. And so one fellow said, I'm going back to my company. And I said, how are you going to do it? He said, watch me in the morning. So he just shot a few shots down through the tent, and he said, boys, a misfire. Well, they sent him home. And so we put the word out, we were going to try it tomorrow. And he sent us all back to our outfit. And then was the time I first got my bath. I had been there about 6 months or so, and the way we cleaned our clothes, we just took a knife and cut all the dirt out like that. They had to send us clear back to where Patton was, and we went in 40 and 8 cars. Now, a 40 and 8 car is for 40 men need horses. And believe me, they tried to put 40 men in. And sometimes you slept on top of the car because there wasn't room inside. And it was an old steam train taking us clear back to the western part of North Africa. And because we had dysentery and so on, we drop off the train, drop our drawers, and take care of things, and then catch up with the train because it was slow. Well, when we got to Fez, they put an electric train on, and they left a lot of guys behind. We missed Sicily because they didn't have enough Navy ships to take us over. And so then we went in below Naples at Sicilia's casino. Down here, Salerno, that's where it was. And then we were coming up here to Monte Cassino, which was a Catholic place that has all the priests up there, a monastery is what I'm trying to think of. And we couldn't get by that. Every time the engineers had put a bridge across the Rapido River for us to go across, they bombed it up, so every night it was the same old thing. So then they pulled us out, and they put us in a landing craft, and we went into Anzio, which is just below Rome. And the two generals got to arguing on who's going to go into Rome first, the British or the Americans. And so they just stopped. All we were supposed to do was cut off the main road and supplies going to Monte Cassino. Simple job, but they just kept us there. And it's a 10-mile square area in that beachhead. And we had to dig our tanks in so they wouldn't bomb the tracks. And 5 men can dig a tank into the ground about half a day. And then we had dug our own dugouts and put shell casings and stuff over them and dirt. And some were 2 men and others were singles. And we lived that way for 5 months. And they even dug out the ground and put trees in there and made a theater for 50 or 60 guys to watch theater shows. And they were trying to make it comfortable for me. Now, my last bath was probably another 4 or 5 months ago. So they took me to a shower truck. And you have 6 shower things, and they would blow a whistle. You take your clothes off, and you blow a whistle, you go in, and you get water on, and then you soap up, and they blow a whistle again, they rinse you off, and you go out the other end, and you get clean clothes, but not your own. But they fit. The reason I was glad to get a shower is once before I had used gasoline to clean my clothes, and I had them hung up to dry, and I didn't have enough drying time, so I put them on anyway, and we moved out. And it got warmer and warmer, so I took my shirt off, and it got warmer, and I took my pants off. I couldn't get enough off because I burned myself for the gasoline. So showers were wonderful things if you ever get there. But on the way back from the shower, that was dangerous too, because they fire a few rounds at us all the time. And the driver drove off to one side, and somebody said, "Duck." I thought they said ducks, and I looked up, and wham, I got a limb took me off the tailgate. There's that Red Cross place there. They patched me up and sent me on my way. Then they told us, they said, don't worry about a thing. They're going to try and push us into the sea. Well, you know, when you tell you that, and then you go back to try and sleep, all you do is just shiver and shake until morning comes. Well, we started out, and they were coming on hell-bent for election, and we got hit in the side, and of course, when the high energy of the shell hits you, it makes it quite hot, and so it burns anything, insulation and so on in there. So I said, bail out, there's fire, and the fire went out. So we crawled back in, and we found out we couldn't move our gun. So I called the commander, and I said, we can't move our gun, we want to retire. No, he said, just stay there and bluff them. She said, I think we're going to stay here, we want to be driven into the sea. Now, when we went to break out of this beachhead, the Germans had mined everything, and wire and so on, and the engineers got a good idea. They take this steel that's along your highway for railing, and they welded them together and put a lot of powder and chucked the powder, and then you push it up through the minefield and call it a snake. And they blow that thing up, and then we could drive through if you're careful. In our breakout, we were the third tank. The first tank went to the right too soon and blew the track off, so we eased around and we caught them all sleeping. They didn't expect us to come. And they had their guns covered and so on, and then we were able to head for Rome. Rome was an open city. They didn't bomb it, didn't shell it or anything like that. And the Germans pulled the other side of Rome. And so when we went into Rome, they let us bed down and they fed us and everything right down in Rome. And then we had a parade the next day for the general through town and so on. And they get some grapes to you, and you get bottles of wine and everything like that. But then you went on the northern end, and you would run into the Germans again. There's a big lake up there, Lake Bracciano. Coming on up here, and I was with them until we got up here to just below Pisa, and they sent me home. The last tank I lost was just below there at Costa di Elsa, and then they sent us home on a ship, and we had a flat top, a small flat top. We thought, well, that's going to be good sailing. And of course, before we got through Gibraltar Straits, they attacked us. And there wasn't a plane go off of that flat top, not a one. They were all disabled planes we were going to take back to the States. But that's all we had to do. Then we arrived in Miami, Royal Palm Hotel, and the doctors looked you over, and I was having crying jabs and things like that. And they said, well, go home, raise your family, you'll be all right. So that's what I headed for. Well, I went to Flint, and where my wife was, and you had to share a taxi then. In other words, you had to have a full taxi before you could drive anywhere. And we were waiting there, and one lady come in, and she said, oh, I've got to get home right away. I've got to go first. He said, that soldier boy's first. She said, but he's going to be home from the factory. I got to feed him. And I said, lady, I hadn't seen my wife in 3 years. Let's go and take care of you. It was a pretty quiet ride from then on. I went on to Fort Sheridan, and I was put in the motor pool there, and I had 90 men and 34 whacks. I didn't have any trouble with the men, but I sure did have trouble with the whacks. And I was discharged out of Fort Sheridan, and then I was never in the parade or anything like that. I couldn't get in the parade. I did get to go with the honors flight out of Florida to go up to see the different monuments and so on. And my first parade is in Bremen. So, for sure, I'm a Bremen guy now. Any questions?
Bill,
Yes.
did you get fined by Patton for not having your helmet or tie on?
I just happened that I was without the helmet on this tank, and when I got out of ordnance for the new motor, he was not around, and I didn't get fined. He didn't get my number 13 off the tank, so he knew who I was.
What do those tanks weigh?
30 ton.
30
30
ton.
ton, yeah.
You go across them bridges, they would,
Pardon?
those bridges are going to hold 30 ton, right?
No, no. It was just too light built.
What engine did they have?
Beg pardon?
What was the engine for the tank?
Engine.
Engine.
Oh, the Russians and the British got diesel tanks, and we got the gasoline. And most of them that we had were Wright whirlwind engines, air-cooled engines.
Mm.
So they could knock off one cylinder, you could still limp along,
Mm-hmm.
but not for long.
Bill, if one of those bridges went, was the tank able to
No,
fall out of there?
most of them just sank with it.
Oh, really?
Then, yeah, this one steel bridge, the guy made it all the way across before it went all the way in.
Let's say those German tanks were
Oh,
real tough, but they lost one. They lose one, but we lost one that could have 15 or 20 take its place. Right?
Yeah, we could lose more than they could, yeah. with the
And
mass.
that German tank is
But they had a much longer powder charge and a higher velocity, 88 millimeter, we had a 75 foot charge. Sometimes we take the powder out of one shell, put it in two, and made a little better shot. Of course, the gun almost goes out the back of it. Yes, sir.
Bill, there was a lot of soldiers dying around you.
Yeah.
Can you give us an idea of how you're surviving, how incredible it was considering everything that was happening around you?
Well, it's just the Lord decided to keep me, I guess. I've got something else yet to do, I guess, and I'm still here.
What I was wondering is, did your whole units, how many units were wiped out and you were the one that didn't get killed? What is that number? I have no idea how large that number is.
Oh, our company would be 17 tanks, and then we'd have service company that served us and so on. They were saved, but only 16 out of the 17, 16 men out of 17 tanks, and there's 5 men to the tank.
You got shrapnel in your bedroll.
Oh, yeah, the one time
Souvenirs.
it ricocheted off the side, and when I went to lay down after the day was over, and all I got was, I had 4 blankets and they were just shredded. I didn't bring that souvenir home. No. Well, you see a lot of fellows that get wounded and so on, you patch them up, but you forget about that. And I saw probably at least three guys go crazy. One kid was real young, and his mother died in childbirth, and so the folks said, well, he killed his mother, and so he went off to the Army at 16 and got in. He lost 13 tanks before he went crazy.
And let me understand what you're saying. When you say he lost 13 tanks, that means that he was in a tank and that tank got destroyed, but he survived.
Yeah.
Then he went to another tank and that one got 13 times that happened.
That's
Wow.
I only lost 5. So that's no record.
Know about the guy in the chicken coop.
Oh, we have some outposts, and the tank, you would go out to beyond the lines, beyond the infantry and so on. And when we make the invasion, you send all the women and children and get them off there. And the men usually stay to feed the chickens and save the cows, provided we don't butcher them first and eat them. And this guy would come around in the afternoon, about 3 or 4 o'clock, and he smelled like he'd had wine. And we watched him like a hawk. Well, I tell you, one day he was in that chicken coop and he was laying out flat like this with a straw down into a barrel of wine. No wonder we couldn't find him. And several times we were able to overrun the Germans, and they always had wine. They took everything from the people. And I think one time we took 13 prisoners and 5 barrels of wine, so they were well stocked.
Bill? Books and the movies talk about the competition between Montgomery and Patton.
Yes.
Was that a real thing, was it?
Yeah.
And you witnessed, did you witness any of that?
I witnessed the fact that, not of Patton, but of other generals, just like this, wanting to get into Rome first and so on. And there was a lot of rivalry. Now, when we were wiped out, I was interviewed by General Bradley. And he says, now you can tell us what happened there. And he says, you don't have to worry about the officers, they'll not come back on you. I said, sir, we don't have any officers left. This Lieutenant Waters was captured and sent up to Germany. But he was a nice guy, and he knew what he was doing.
What was the reaction of the local people to the Germans?
Oh,
To the Italians?
the Germans
the
had
Americans?
taken everything from them, so they helped
There's
us.
a great amount of animosity in there.
When we got into Italy, we had partisans that were going out, and they would check where the guns were and come back and tell us so we could eliminate it, you know. But they didn't have anything to eat. I mean, we could find some potatoes around, but you didn't get eggs and things like that for your potatoes if you want, you know, you want to open it up. And then they started mining the potato fields with bounce and Betty. So you got in there and popped that sucker off and bounced up and blew up. So we had to kind of put that. And souvenirs, you didn't look for souvenirs too often. We had some fellows that, well, two fellows that would go out and the Germans would be dead there and they knock on teeth out to get their gold. They only did that one night and we got rid of that. One time I decided to loot this nice house and beautiful set of dishes. Oh, you know, I always thought we were going home in 6 months, so I put it on the back of the tank. And you know, the next day, wham! There was one cup out of the whole set. I threw it away and I never looted it again. Well, this is confession now.
You landed ends of Kurt at the bottom.
Yeah,
You went all the way up to
I
Germany.
went all the way up here to, where the devil's pizza, right there. I stopped right in here.
And then you went into Germany too, right?
No, I went home.
Oh,
I had enough. 36 months overseas was enough.
Wow.
Well, I was in the Army about 5 years. Then I went in for a year, you know.
Duration 6 months. Duration 6 months. Right?
Duration in 6 months, yes.
What kind of country is that up to? Is it
Oh,
mountain?
this is all mountainous.
Mountain.
Yeah. In fact, there on the beachhead, they had one railroad gun. They would run out of that mountain, and every night about 5 or 6 o'clock, because they knew we were usually 8 then, and they would send around, we called it Manziel Annie. It was probably a railroad gun with about 16-inch bore, and they drop it in. And they didn't care whether they hit a hospital or what they did. They were just annoying. They tried bombing it, and they couldn't get it done because they moved it back into the mountain after they fired a few rounds. You would tear up the track, but overnight they would build the track up and have it ready for us at 5 o'clock. And we would go for our meals to the kitchen 5 or 6 at a time because they just dropped so much stuff on us. So the food wasn't dangerous, but the Germans were. Well, I was going to finish on that big railroad gun because the Air Force couldn't bomb it out for some reason. They brought 12 guns. I'm trying to think what they were, but they were go 8-inch or so. And this one would just fire one round, and then fire another round, and you watch where he was doing this. And finally he closed on, and they closed all 12 guns on and wiped it out. Well, we couldn't do anything with it. All this Angel Beach was marsh at one time, and an American engineer drained it for them. So it was a lot of ditches we had to go through, and and marshland and what. One time we had a church call, and now a church call, the chaplain has a Jeep, and he has a little trailer, and he has a little organ on the back, and he has the help. And so he would have church for us. In the beachhead, we had a half a log that we could sit on. And a lot of times he would be preaching and he'd say, "Amen, hit the dirt." And so we had to do it. And then one time, we were on an outpost and they had a church call. That meant that a couple from each tank could come back to church. Well, there was only two of us. My gunner and I went back, and it was a Catholic preach. What were they calling the chaplain? I don't know. Anyway, so he said, "Well, let's call this cave." So I was in church in a cave. I want to tell you, 2 or 3 are down. I tell you. What's that? Oh, he was close. Questions?
Well, you see a lot of bad stuff.
Not in a short time.
That German tank, was that a better tank than what we had?
Much better, yeah. See, they were manufacturing, from 1939, they were manufacturing their tanks in Russia. Russia was working with them, and they were really rolling them out.
Did you get out before the war ended? What's the timing?
Pardon?
The timing of when you got out and then when the war ended?
Oh, I was in Fort Sheridan until August of '45. So it wasn't too much longer.
I was lucky I was going VJ Day. I was going to me. I got awful drunk in there too. You're going back my blood schedule. I remember.
Oh, we loved the Navy. If you got on a Navy ship, there was all kinds of coffee, and they had good food.
You tell about the Germans down there. What about the Italian military?
Oh, they were, can I use the word piss poor?
Allied with the Germans, weren't they?
Yes, they were. And what the Germans did, they would take half a dozen Italian gunners, set them up as delayed, and they would stay there with a gun on them until we got to finishing it off. And they would take off in their Jeep and leave them. And the hands would go up from the Italians. You know, they used to delay. So that's what, this whole thing is delaying up here. And if we'd have shut it off down here, it'd been over so much quicker.
How many guys in the tank? Five men in the tank?
5 minute tank.
Driver?
Assistant driver, and gunner, assistant gunner, and the tank commander. And the assistant gunner doesn't do much other than one time when I had my periscope shot off, I thought I was blinded for a short time. And I pulled it down, he just gives me another one, and I shot another one up until they shoot him off. And,
just how big was the inside of the tank? I mean, there had to be 5 men in there. How
okay,
big?
here's 5 people.
Wow.
It's close. And this is the problem when you're trying to bail out. The poor guy over and the last one's out. You know, he gets in trouble. Yeah.
How well could you see out of the tank?
Oh, okay, the first tanks we had at Fort Knox, it was a 4.5 inch bulletproof glass by about 1 inch, so it was very poor vision. And then when they got the periscopes, they got to be about 6 or 7 inches in width and about 1.5 inches in height. And you could see pretty good, but the tank commander couldn't do that. I tried it one time, and you just trying to pick up a gun replacement. You're looking for a flash or something that's different, and you finally had to just throw the hatch open and just put your arms in, and you have field glasses.
Mm-hmm.
Our first tanks, they had a transmitter and receiver in the 3 command tanks, and the rest of us had receivers, so we couldn't talk back to them in anything that we saw. And then we had a radio man that was very artistic. He was good at what he did. He stole well. He got us transformers so that we could talk back and forth. And then it was probably a year later they decided that everybody should have a transmitter.
When you go into a town, transfer and person to take over a town.
It's different. Every situation is different. Usually you're the one that's going in and finding the trouble and try to eliminate it, yeah. 34th Division was with us, and they were wonderful. And the 10th Mountain in Casino there, they were a good outfit. And then there was a Jack outfit, the 443rd. They were Wildcats, and they finally took Casino.
Okay, Bill, thank you so much.
I'm glad I had friends here. Thank you for coming.
I have one answer to the question in regard to how many people died. American Legion put out a book on World War II from the Bremen area. It's available and so forth. And there were 23 men who died during the war from the Bremen area. And there were around 350 that served in the war. That was men and women, because there were women who also served from the Bremen area. So gives you an idea of what really happened number-wise.
Well, thank you, Bill, so much. It was very interesting.